The second person to come on the screen was named Ella Waldeck, who's a very famous wrestler. She said, "My real name is Elsie Shevchenko." And I was like, that's weird. And then she said, "I'm from Custer, Washington." And Custer is like right next door to where my grandma was from.
It sounds small.
And I was like, there's no fucking way we're not related to this woman. We are the only Ukrainians in Washington. And so I called my grandma up and I'm like, "Hey, do we have a wrestling relative?" And my grandma goes, "Oh, yes." Yes, she was quite famous. And I was like, "Why would you not tell me someone?" "I don't know." My grandfather had a twin who was my grandmother's favorite. He drowned. And so my great-grandmother took it out on my grandfather really cruelly, and I think physically. And then my mother was her favorite. So it was like kind of the doubling of the situation that I had with my grandmother, where there has to be a favorite. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I thought she was so beautiful and kind. People really liked her. She was a really nice person, but that's not who she was. That was her mask. Like, that was her masking that she did. Play mom for a second and then be like, nah. It was like that my whole childhood.
Yeah.
And it got worse the older I got. I finally just said, go to hell, please.
The question is, how does that affect your decision to have kids, or what kind of father do you think you'd be? What's interesting to me is I think my father wasn't a bad father. He was the father he was supposed to be, which was non-existent. And I have an incredible father figure in my uncle. I'm really unhappy with the way that my father treated things as an adult, once I actually wanted something from him, but that had nothing to do with raising me. So it's a weird thing where people put a lot on it. So to me, it wasn't that I wanted a father. Welcome to Identified, where we explore, challenge, and redefine the traditional concepts of family and identity. In this episode, I am joined by acclaimed singer-songwriter and author Neko Case.
Well, my family's Ukrainian. They came through Russia. They sailed on a boat from Germany to the United States. I don't know exactly where they came in. They changed their name from Shevchenko. I would still have if they hadn't changed their name. It's only recently that people have decided that their heritage that they bring as an immigrant to the United States is still important and vital and sacred. So they were all about just shutting down everything about themselves. Like, we don't speak Ukrainian. I mean, they did speak Ukrainian, but they wouldn't really teach anybody anything, and nobody talked about themselves. So all the stories I have are like weird Gothic fairy tales.
What was this, like Ellis Island? Like, when did they come over?
It was like 1912 or something.
Okay.
So it was like pre-Cold War. I always thought we were Russian because they wouldn't talk about themselves, and somebody had said they were Russian, and so I believed it. I don't know, sometime in my mid-30s, early 40s maybe. I met with my Uncle Bill. At this point, I had taken some Russian in school, and I wanted to talk to him about the paperwork, about where, you know, the boat the family came over on and stuff, and it was all written in Cyrillic, so I could read it. He couldn't read it, but he could understand it. So I would read it, and he would tell me what it said.
He could understand hearing it?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Because he couldn't read the language because he wasn't taught, but he just knew it from his parents. So that was interesting, and I learned a couple things, but I didn't retain them very well, and I had all this information, and it burned up in the house fire that I had in 2017. And since then, all those relatives have passed. Not that they were going to give up a whole lot anyway. They're all basically clams.
Right.
Just...
It's interesting that, like, at what point did you say, well, I want to take Russian? I assume that was because of the connection and because you knew.
Yeah, and it was being offered in my junior college, and I was like, well, what other, in Tacoma, and I was like, well, I'm not going to get a chance to do this again. So I took it for like a year and a half, 2 years, and I could barely conjugate a verb because it's very complicated. It was a nice exchange to have with my Uncle Bill. He wasn't exactly eager to talk about anything.
And you started looking into your genealogy around the same time, or?
Nah.
You got the documents somehow.
I got the documents about them coming over, but I don't have them anymore. They're gone. So I'll probably never know. And Shevchenko is the most popular.
Oh, it's a common name.
It's like Jones or something.
Right.
Smith. It's really popular.
And your parents didn't have much to tell you.
They don't know anything.
My grandparents are Russian Jews and Romanian Jews, and they wanted to talk very little, and apparently their parents wanted to talk very little. I think that was a very common thing.
Yeah.
People came to America to leave, to
We're
truly
American
leave, right? And change their names.
Yeah, like imagine the trauma that would make you kill your own heritage. I read a lot of indigenous writers, and they talk a lot about how not speaking the language is one way to kill an entire culture. And that was thrust upon indigenous people here, an incredibly cruel type of a genocidal move. And our families committed suicide, essentially, the cultural suicide.
Right.
They're lost. A lot of people are super lost and don't know how to be citizens, you know? There's just like these weird toxic flailings kind of.
But then there are people like you, a lot of people who still feel connected to it.
I had to look for it.
Yeah.
There are some natural things, I think, that stayed alive in there. I've had to pretty much search for it. I'm not a natural Ukraina.
As a kid in Washington, a normal American kid in air quotes, was there ever a point in your childhood when you realized, oh, interesting, my family's from someplace else and that makes me different? Or did you totally grow up just like everybody else, feeling American?
I didn't think about it very hard until I was probably in, around 19 or so. I figured out we were Ukrainian, and it was also suggested to me earlier than I found out that Shevchenko was not a Russian name. It's a Ukrainian name, and I kind of got it then because all Russian names end in a gendered way, whereas Shevchenko is a neuter.
Oh, interesting.
It does not have a gender attached to it. It's not patronymic, it's not matriarchal, so it's just very different from the way Russian is. But there just weren't any Ukrainian people around.
Right.
There weren't people to go, hey. It's funny, my partner has the same relationship with his dad that you do, but his dad would never acknowledge him. Really sucks because his dad is Canadian and his mom is
thing,
and his mom is from Minnesota. And so they lived in, I think, near Regina together. He had a heart attack and she was pregnant. So he's like, you need to go back to America. I can't take care of you. And she was like, okay. Poor Jeff, he just wanted to know who his dad was. So he did all this searching and looking, and he finally got his dad on the phone.
Whoa.
And his dad was just like, nope, sounds like something my brother would do. And he always wanted a dad so bad. It still like crushes him to this day. He's since died, and so he's like, yeah, my dad just didn't want me. And on the other hand, like, we have a daughter, and he's the greatest dad. Just treats her so lovingly. So it's nice to know that you can decide that shit ends here.
Yeah, that's what we're shifting now. But so many people have asked me, like, basically as a result of what your father did or didn't do. I don't have kids. My wife and I don't have kids. We're talking about it. But the question is, how does that affect your decision to have kids, or what kind of father do you think you'd be? And what's interesting to me is I think my father wasn't a bad father. He was the father he was supposed to be, which was non-existent. And I had an incredible father figure in my uncle. I'm really unhappy with the way that my father treated things as an adult, once I actually wanted something from him, but that had nothing to do with raising me. So it's a weird thing where people put a lot on it. So to me, it wasn't that I wanted a father.
Well, it's also such a bad arrangement in a way. Like,
it's not ideal.
If you're going to still be alive and they're going to know who you are, they're going to want to know things about you.
And you're going to be famous and they're going to look like you and all that stuff too.
Yeah, and then it also really strengthens that idea that men have nothing to do with women getting pregnant.
There's definitely a bit of the like,
what, we don't just do this. And then they look like you.
Right. Sounds like something the brother would do, right?
That sounds like something my brother would do.
Yeah. Did you grow up with siblings and two parents? Let's go back to the childhood.
No, I had no siblings because my parents didn't stay together that long.
Did you grow up with your mother?
I lived with my dad mostly. My mom wasn't into having a kid. She would kind of pretend she was into it and then vanish.
Like leave town.
Go through the motions of being loving, but not committed and not into it. It was like a role she was playing.
And you felt that as a kid?
I believed her some of the time, and I worshipped her. So I thought she was so beautiful and kind. People really liked her. She was a really nice person, but that's not who she was. That was her mask. Like, that was her masking that she did. Play mom for a second and then be like, nah. It was like that my whole childhood.
Yeah.
And it got worse the older I got. I finally just said, go to hell, please.
So no relationship?
No.
At a certain point?
No.
Father?
And it's very positive that there's no relationship.
Yeah, you're glad you did
very
that.
Happy.
Yeah, there are people who do that and it can be very, very hard. And I know people who've done that and deeply regretted it, but it sounds like
no,
it's the right
I do
thing.
not regret it. It was the greatest decision I ever made.
Yeah. And your father? So was it a better situation with your father?
No, I mean, it was just different. My father was also a kid, having a kid, obviously. And
your parents were young?
They were really young. And it was a teenage pregnancy.
Okay.
They had a kid. They didn't want a kid. It was legal to have an abortion at that time, but for whatever, maybe my mom's Catholic upbringing. I don't really know, though, because I know she desperately did not want a kid. I don't know if she got got badgered into it or what happened. Like, I'll never know the story. So she just kind of took off, and I was left with my dad, who was really, really depressed and really miserable, unbeknownst to me, suffering a great deal of trauma due to childhood sexual abuse. He was a very conflicted person whose development was arrested probably around like 9 or 10. So he took great joy in certain things that really make me fond of him. I'm sure he's the reason I love animals so much and camping and things like that. We went on vacation or something were basically like things Boy Scouts would do. I think that was like a happy time in his life.
And that's around that age.
We really bonded over those things, and he also didn't pay any attention to me either. He was very quiet, didn't really talk. So I was a very lonely kid.
And a lonely kid at a time when there's no internet, there's less entertainment. Less stuff to do.
Yeah, I'm actually glad there was no internet then.
Yeah.
I'm glad to know a world with it and without it, because, I watch my own daughter and other kids, or just people in general, like, you'll be traveling and there will be like 75 people in front of you and everyone's looking at their phone.
Right.
And like, you watch the emotions go over people's faces, like as to what they're watching or who they're talking to. And it just makes me so sad. It's like such a crushing dystopia. I hate using the word dystopia because it's constantly uttered, but sometimes I like to just make people look at me and then I smile at them or something and they like it. They're not like that. They're always surprised. And then they'll be like, would you watch my bag while I go to the bathroom? Sure.
All right. You seem trustworthy because you made eye contact.
Yeah, I smiled at you. So you're the person I know here. Could you watch my bag? Yeah. So it's like you have a little beginning with somebody and it feels like a rebellious act kind of.
Was there extended family around? Grandparents when you were a kid, cousins?
Yeah, my grandparents on both sides were really great. I was really close with my mom's mom.
And they were probably younger for grandparents then.
Yeah. Granted, my mom had 3 other siblings, so, my grandparents were still older, but she just was really good to me. And I think she didn't have that relationship with my mom. So I think that might be some of the resentment my mom had toward me, was that I was liked by her mom. But then again, nobody ever told me either, so I can only assume.
As a kid, did you feel like your family was sort of normal, or was everyone around you, siblings, 2 parents, were they much more traditional and you were different?
I mean, I thought it was odd that I didn't have siblings, but my parents also didn't fight over me or anything when they got divorced. Like, it wasn't an ugly scene. And they basically just explained, like, yeah, we don't get along. And of course, they weren't having more kids, so that made sense. And I was fine alone. I was like really ADHD, neurodivergent kid. So I was happy to live kind of in my own little world, but I was also super lonely at the same time.
Yeah. How old are you in that? Do you remember that conversation when they said to you, we're getting divorced?
A little bit. There was no drama around it. There was no fighting, no heightened. It was just like, well, we're going to do this. It's like, okay. And as a little kid, you don't really understand what divorce is.
Right.
Your parents don't live together anymore, but you're not sure. I don't know. It's a very complicated thing to try to understand.
Yeah, most kids that I know whose parents get divorced, of course, there are fights and there are things leading up to it, and then the decision justifies everything that was happening, but you didn't have that. You just had this sort of moment of like, we're going to stop hanging out together.
Yeah, and then, maybe they just were really good at hiding it, but they never fought around me anyway.
Right.
I mean, I know they weren't happy together, but I also saw them interacting for the most of the rest of my life too. So I didn't think they hated each other either.
So they stayed in touch, and they would obviously
like they
meet
had
up to
have a
exchange
kid together. So.
Yeah. Has there been much loss and trauma in your family?
I think it's all it is, especially the Ukrainians. I don't even know what happened to them, but I mean, being a Ukrainian in Russia is not good. They lived in a very industrial city called Saratov, which is just south of Moscow, and I don't know where they came from in Ukraine before that, but if you're Ukrainian in an industrial city in Moscow, probably not a good thing.
Right.
My grandfather had a twin who was my grandmother's favorite. He drowned, and so my great-grandmother took it out on my grandfather really cruelly, and I think physically. And then my mother was her favorite. So it was like kind of the doubling of the situation that I had with my grandmother, where there has to be a favorite. I don't know why.
Yeah. And these are stories that have been handed down. That's how you know these things.
And I heard that story once, barely. So I could be remembering some of the things about it wrong, but I do know that he had a twin who died by drowning. And the weird thing is my other grandfather on my father's side was also a twin.
What is family to you?
Chosen. And my partner and my stepdaughter, They're definitely my family. You know, I chose to never have children, but being a parent to a person who needs help being parented I've never felt more useful. I don't know that I'm the greatest parent in the world. I think my greatest parent was my stepdad, so I'm good at being a stepdad, I think. That's how I like to think of it anyway. And then at one point, my friend Ruth Lightman was making a movie about wrestlers. She asked me to do some music. I said, yeah, I would love to do that, because it was a movie about female wrestlers from the 50s.
Oh, wow.
And these were like big circuit stars. The second person to come on the screen was named Ella Waldeck, who's a very famous wrestler. She said, my real name is Elsie Shevchenko. And I was like, that's weird. And then she said, I'm from Custer, Washington. And Custer is like right next door to where my grandma was from.
It sounds small.
And I was like, there's no fucking way we're not related to this woman. We are the only Ukrainians in Washington. And so I called my grandma up and I'm like, hey, do we have a wrestling relative? And my grandma goes, oh, yes. Yes, she was quite famous. And I was like, why would you not tell me someone? I don't know. You know, she just wouldn't, nobody talked about each other or themselves. So it was just like, Jesus Christ. Like my grandma, she used to be in a harmony singing band. I had 3 records out before she goes, yes, I was in a harmony singing band with my brother, Edwin, back in some of the venues that Loretta Lynn was playing. And I was like, why the fuck wouldn't I want to know that? I don't know.
It's incredible.
It never came up.
And that's just funny, because it's one thing to want to shut down the past and not talk about it and say, you know, we don't talk about that. It's another thing to just sort of, oh yeah, of course, I never mentioned it. Like the biggest question is like, what haven't you told me?
It wasn't even,
right?
haven't I mentioned it? It was like, why would I mention it? Why do you think nobody would be interested in you?
Right.
You're so interesting. So crazy.
The wrestler, I assume, had passed. It was too late to get in touch with the wrestler.
No, I met the wrestler and she was lovely, super tough.
What age when you met her?
She was in her 70s.
Wow, amazing.
And because there was a premiere in Toronto and she got a bunch of the wrestlers to come for the Q&A
for
after the movie.
Okay.
And my friends and I were playing the party for the movie down the street at the Horseshoe Tavern. So they all came over, and Ruth, who had gotten pretty close with Ella, now named Ella Waldeck.
Which is what, your cousin?
She's my great aunt. She was my grandfather's sister.
That's a pretty close relative.
Pretty close.
Yeah.
And so it's just so weird. And she was really kind. And at first she was kind of like, oh, I don't know about you. And then I kind of said some stuff and she was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, put her in a headlock. You know?
Yeah. And she just was a really sweet, like she'd be really coarse 1 second, super tough. And then she, you know, was also a person who really loved writing poetry. And she just was a complete human. And I really liked that about her. She did all kinds of crazy things. Like she was a roller derby queen. She was a security guard. She ended up in a match with a woman, I think her name was Eva Lee, maybe? She died. And so my aunt was pegged as this murderer.
Oh, as a result of the match.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And, you know, the cops came and, you know, they figured out that she didn't kill her, that it was an accident. Right. She was labeled murderer. And she's like, you think that didn't feel bad? I'm like, of course that felt bad.
Yeah.
But the movie's called Lipstick and Dynamite by this woman named Ruth Lightman, who's an incredible documentarian who just made a documentary about abortion rights in America, too, called No One Asked You. She's a great filmmaker.
Wait, one more question about the wrestler, because that's fascinating. Sounds like you really connected with her. Did you sort of see parts of you that you felt like came from her? Does that make sense? And like, as I've met my father's sister and got to spend, 3 incredible afternoons with her, there were times when I was like, oh, we have a lot in common. Some of the stuff that I really like about her, I feel I didn't get to have this moment with my father, but I get to have it with her. Like there is some of this sort of stuff where I feel like I'm learning more about myself by being with this person who is of the next generation.
I think I saw a lot of physicality and a lot of rage in her and a lot of being misunderstood. And I really felt incredibly validated meeting her. And it was just also nice to know at least one woman in our family didn't just passively sit by and let people treat them like shit. She's kind of my hero for that. Not that she didn't get treated like shit sometimes, she did, but she ended up in a very happy marriage and, she was her own person. I like that.
Thanks for tuning in. Please consider subscribing to Identified wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss an episode. We're on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all other major streaming platforms. And be sure to explore identifiedpod.com, the place to gain a better understanding of family. Our executive producer is Kiran Banerjee, and the show is produced by Palm Tree Island. The music for Identified is by Noella and Patricia Brennan. I'm Nabil Ayers. Thanks for tuning in.